So, Liberal NDG MNA Desiree McGraw recently passed her first bill unanimously in the National Assembly. She shared a very personal story just before the bill was passed, and from now on, October 15th will be Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Day in Quebec. This bill is very close to her heart. Desiree McGraw joins us now. Thank you so much for your time today, Desiree.
Thank you so much for having me, Natasha.
I saw you on CTV talking about this. I'm smiling as I say this. It was beautiful, honestly, Desiree. I was struck by how you had a last minute change of heart and you decided to tell your personal story in the National Assembly last week. So what was that like for you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And look, it's often in politics, you think about it as dehumanizing and sometimes self-aggrandizing, but I found the experience so far to be quite humanizing and humbling, actually. And, you go into politics thinking about like big public policy issues. And as it turns out, it's been on this very personal issue for me where, I feel like I've had the most impact. And it's been a long journey. It's been 8 years since I lost Catherine. But, I've told the story of, 5 miscarriages. And then in 2016, at 36 weeks of pregnancy, I lost our baby girl, Catherine, who was stillborn, following an undiagnosed autoimmune issue. And it's been a long journey. And when I went to present this bill, I had, of course, planned to indicate that I had personal experience, but I didn't plan to get into actually any of the details. That part was to remain private. But I had a last-minute change of heart, and I have to say the response, I think, in relation actually to my telling my own story has been very strong, and both in the National Assembly, colleagues and from all parties coming up to me and sharing their own stories of their own personal loss or a brother or a sister that they might have lost 10, 20, 50 years ago even. So it's really been incredible. And then, of course, hearing from people in my riding and really across Quebec and frankly even Canada about their own stories. So creating a space, I think, where people can destigmatize and just feel like they can talk about something that's really hard and often complex.
That it's kind of everything, isn't it? Like I was thinking how we just tend not to have those hard conversations. We tend not to talk about things that make people uncomfortable, like deeply emotional experiences. And then they kind of become verboten or taboo.
Mm-hmm.
So does it feel, I must feel so, is there a relief almost in telling your story?
Well, look, it's been a journey. I would say I'm actually quite a private person, even though I'm in public life. Look, I will just be very honest, as I have been, in a sense that's been liberating. I think at some level, I think when one loses a child, I think any parent who's had that horrific experience will say that you blame yourself. And if you lose a child in your body, as those of us who've experienced perinatal loss, it's hard to blame anyone but yourself. And so maybe at some level, I think I've started to forgive myself. And so that's getting very, psychoanalytical. But I think in that sense, it's been liberating. But really, I hope liberating for other people, because in our family, we know this now as Catherine's Law after our daughter, our sister for my boys. But we hope it's the law of all those little ones that have been lost to so many families across Quebec, 23,000 families every year. And if you times that, all the members of those families and then the years, because you never really get over this kind of loss, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Quebecers. So hopefully it's a first step in creating a space where people can name it, can be destigmatized, because yes, it is taboo. I always say, like, perinatal loss or losing a baby isn't contagious. Like, if you're not going to catch it by talking to someone about it. And so, talk about it. It's hard, recognizing the loss, recognizing that it's a real loss. It does help, I think, those of us who've experienced it.
I'm curious to what you said when we started here just a minute or so ago, Desiree, and that's the idea that you told yourself the day you were going to do this that you weren't going to go into detail, and then you changed your mind, and I'm wondering what brought on that change.
Actually, it's the women in my caucus who I thanked at the very beginning of my speech. I acknowledged each of them by name. They've been an incredible support in this journey. My friends, of course, at home, and my family, of course. But it's quite unique to be a woman in politics at this time, and there's quite a strong group of us in the Liberal caucus, and I would say MNAs in general in Quebec. And they've been the ones. And actually sharing my story with them and their incredible support, that's really what that day made me feel like, you know what, I can tell my story. I switched into English at that point. I've been speaking French. I said, Monsieur le Président, you'll allow me to, as of course I am allowed to speak in my native language. It's la langue maternelle, la langue de maman, my mother language, not just my mother tongue. Because there was no way I could tell the story, improvised at the last minute in French. I needed to speak in my own language. And so it was the women in the caucus, frankly, and my colleagues who encouraged me.
I'm thinking about, so again, October 15th will be Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Day in Quebec. We talked about sort of the importance of breaking that cycle, that stigma of these things being, we're kind of don't allow ourselves to talk about them. So what do you really hope comes of marking that day?
So it's creating a space. It's acknowledging it in the public domain, and actually, it's a hope. It's just one first step. It's an essential, necessary but not sufficient step. There's so much more we need to be doing in public policy, investing in research on the causes and the consequences of perinatal loss, greater support in our health and social care systems to support not just families, because there's huge psychosocial implications, but also, frankly, for the doctors and nurses who are supporting those of us who've experienced it. When I went to the MUHC to deliver Catherine, I was actually scheduled for a C-section the following week. When they found out she was no longer alive, I still had to go through a full labor. And I could see the nurses were pretty devastated. They're like, I'm in the maternity ward and I did not sign up for this. So I think they need support themselves.
Wow.
They need to be able to support families. And then there's leave. Like if you have a miscarriage and it's before your mat leave would kick in, I mentioned 5 miscarriages, you don't have any leave. You're back at work the next day. Fathers don't get any leave at all. So there needs to be a recognition just through our public policies to support the families and the system in supporting those families and people like me who had access to some private help. No, it can't just be for people who are privileged. It has to be available to all Quebec families.
How open is the government, do you think, to that?
Well, frankly, it's not every day that they accept even a piece of legislation that's proposed by an opposition member. This is the first and only of this legislature that has been accepted by the government. In fact, the first in years by Liberals. So it's very unusual, but they did accept it. It was voted unanimously. And in speaking to the leader parlementaire, Simon Barrette, today, I said, I'm coming at you with some next steps. Thank you for supporting this, but I'm coming at you now for some next steps. So I hope they are going to be open to it, because it's one. There's the symbolism that's important, but there's a lot more work concretely we need to do to support families.
Good luck to you. Good for you.
Congratulations. And just, I guess, before we run out of time, which we basically are out of time, but Desiree, I'm wondering, as you said, so many families experience this. Do you have something you'd like to say to them?
Well, thank you. And that's really where I need to start is I am so sorry for your loss. I know as a parent, we never get over this. And there's as much as we work towards it, there's nothing you can do to ever get over the loss of your baby. But I think by sharing that and knowing that you're not alone, that you loved your baby and you had hopes and dreams, but you're not alone, and your loss matters, and we see you. We see you.
Oof.
Yeah.
I'm feeling, I'm emotional,
Okay.
but I'm also feeling very proud that you're my MNA and NDG right now.
Thank you, Natasha. That means a lot to me. It's nice to speak to you and to Aaron. Thank you so much for having me.
And for people listening, it's important to know, as she said, you're not alone. And there are people out there who want to help, who can help. So it's important to use those people, lean on them. That's what this is all about. It's about community. Desiree, thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
All the best. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Desiree McGraw, Liberal
Again.
MNA, where you are in NDG.
And thanks to her, October 15th will now be Infant and Pregnancy Loss Awareness Day in Quebec.
Did you know that first thing that has ever been accepted by this government in terms of brought up by another party? I had no idea.
That's exciting.
That's pretty
though.
amazing.
Yeah.
Good for her.